Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Awaken to Your Soul Path. Today, I am joined by Josh Speraneo, and we are going to be talking about the 5 pillars of self worth. And obviously, I am your host, Barbara. I forgot to introduce myself, but by now, you should be familiar with me. And I've been really looking forward to this because Josh and me, we did the HSP Summit together. If you have missed it, maybe there are still some replays somewhere around. But it was an awesome thing, and that's how we connected. And then we got to talking about doing a podcast or an interview like we're doing right now. And his topic is the 5 pillars of self worth. So I am looking forward to diving into this. So thank you so much, Josh, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thank you again for being part of the summit. It was amazing. Just so many incredible speakers who I think the world of. And so having so many people agree to be part of it and just the reception overall has been incredible. And so, yeah, so it's great to be here and enjoyed our conversation. And I'm excited to see where this one goes.
Right. Yes. And shortly on the HSP Summit, it's so important that we talk about these topics and also the topics that we talk about in my shows in general. Because I remember when I was still fighting myself and figuring out who I was, all of this information was not available. And
Mhm.
I found out by accident that I am a highly sensitive person. I had no idea that it existed, let alone what it meant. So by talking about these things, by doing these podcasts, by doing these interviews, by doing these summits, I think we're bringing massive awareness to the people that have always felt different than others.
Mhm.
And obviously, that affects your self worth, right? When you feel like an alien, an outsider, a black sheep, different from everybody else, you start doubting your
Mhm.
worth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing we can preface kind of before we dive into the 5 pillars is what I call the 5 enemies of healthy self worth. So you have criticism, cruelty, mockery, abuse, or trauma. All of those things are things that we experience early on in our lives that affect our sense of self worth. And so, in a sense, as babies, we're born and we have probably the healthiest self-worth we'll ever have in our lives. We believe that we're worthy of being fed and loved and cared for, and we expect that. We cry and somebody's going to come take care of me.
Yes.
We're hungry or we need to be changed, somebody's going to take care of that. And I think it's those moments, even in childhood at an early age, where obviously between 1 and 7, so much of our paradigm is set and so much of who we'll become is programmed into us. But even after that, going into our early teenage years, so many of us experience those 5 enemies of healthy self-worth. And it's kind of like, we have a full tank and then the analogy I like to use is a bank account. So we have this full self-worth account, and it's suddenly people are making these withdrawals and we end up dealing with low self-worth and everything that comes with that on the other side.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think we are born perfect. I think everybody is born perfect. And
Mhm.
I think right about if you don't have childhood traumas, then until you're 4 years old, when you start going to school, you feel like you can do anything. You have
Mhm.
absolute faith in yourself. You feel like you can conquer the world and you don't doubt yourself and you just do, right? You
Yeah.
don't worry about will I ever be able to walk? No, you try, 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 and try, and then you walk. And riding a bicycle and all of these other things, you do it, and you
Yeah.
have 100% faith in yourself, in your worth, in your abilities, that you will make this happen. And
Mhm.
things that influence that is indeed criticism. When you have highly critical parents that constantly say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or proper ladies don't do this, or boys need to be dads. So it can
Mhm.
be paradigms that come from the family, it can be paradigms that come from other influential people in your life, but usually up until 4 it will be your immediate family because you
Mhm.
haven't been to school yet. um, the same goes for when you are traumatized in the first 4 years, right? Because if you have an abusive parent, or maybe, God forbid, both of them are abusive, then that impacts you severely when that happens at a very, very young age. So all of these things, I love the term enemies of self-worth, because they undermine your belief in yourself and your belief in that you are worth living, and worth knowing, and worth being,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. And I think in the phrase I like to use is a sense of unwavering self-worth. And I absolutely agree. Up till 4, we feel invincible. If everything has gone well in our lives to that point, we do have this sense of invincibility. It's what makes the kid jump off the furniture with the Superman cape and, express themselves openly and honestly wherever they go, maybe a little bit too openly and honestly sometimes, which is always worth a laugh. But yeah, we have that sense of the world loves me and I love the world and I'm going to explore because the world is safe. And yeah, unfortunately, that just for so many of us does not last. Like you said, much past 4, maybe, again, maybe into school. But that's where, if we think about it, so many of us, our first exposure to criticism, cruelty, or mockery was in grade school. Early on, we said something that wasn't, popular, or that somebody didn't like, and they started to, instead of commenting on what we said or correcting what we said, they made a comment about our value or our worth and called us stupid or ugly, or any number of names. And we learned that, okay, speaking up is dangerous, being myself is dangerous, it attracts attention, and then people might make fun of me. So I either need to become who they expect me to be, or I need to be very quiet and very careful. And you made a great point earlier, especially for those of us who are highly sensitive. We're born that way. It's a trait that we have. It's our genetic wiring. And so we're wired to be even more sensitive to those statements, to those insults,
Yeah.
and to oftentimes internalize those and think, oh, wow, many of us fall into the trap of feeling like other people know us better than we know ourselves. And when that happens, everything goes straight to our heart, which we can come back to that later on. There are some things we can do to help with that. But yeah, I mean, at that point, it's just like this poison arrow that goes in, and it's like, okay, well, if that part of me is bad, I have to hide that. And if we internalize it enough, it's like, if I'm bad or part of me is bad, I need to hide myself, and it can have some very serious repercussions down the road.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We have another thing that's connected to the high sensitive trait, and that is that we tend to take things very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And in high school, or no, not high school, where that's later. So in school, um, we are sort of, it's like going on a conveyor belt in a factory, right? We
Yeah.
come in as different people, but the end result that comes out of the conveyor belt at school needs to be
Mm-hmm.
uniform, needs to be the same, because we learn the exact same things. And children among themselves can be very harsh. If I was a happy child, I wasn't, but let's say I was a happy child and you were a traumatized child because you had abusive parents, and
Mm-hmm.
you would then take that out on me in school because you needed to vent your frustration and your energy somewhere. And
Yeah.
me being a highly sensitive person, I would then think, what's wrong with me that you're treating me this way?
Mm-hmm.
And if you then have abusive parents, that is even worse. I come from an abusive parent, and I always wondered, why doesn't my father love me? What is wrong with me that he treats me this way, that he cannot be nice to me, that he wants to do these things to me? I kept looking in myself, within
Mm-hmm.
myself. I took it very personal, and that's in general a thing that children already do. But I
Yeah.
think the highly sensitive child specifically does it even more. And then when that continues to happen, I was bullied at school because I was already a victim at home. So there's
Mm-hmm.
something with your energy that then attracts bullies at school. I think because you already learned not to defend yourself, because then it
Yeah.
became worse at home. So then you're very attractive to bullies, and later when you're older, narcissists, but that's a very different topic.
Mm-hmm.
And you start doubting yourself,
Mm-hmm.
start doubting if you can continue to go on the way that you are. And if you then have gifts like I have the gift of knowing. So I
Mhm.
knew things that I couldn't really know, but I knew them, and I would then talk about them or ask
Mhm.
questions about them. And that scared the people in my environment, because they were like, "Ooh, no, well, how did you get that information? And you cannot be talking about this." And the combination of all of these factors, and I'm assuming there are even more, they do something with our internal world and our belief in ourselves. And then we start to change because we feel like we need to become the person that they won't bully, that they want to be
Yeah.
friends with, that they want to invite in life. And it becomes even worse if teachers participate in
Mhm.
the bullying, because that also happens. Teachers who vent their frustration or their anger on their students and
Yeah.
making them feel dumb or silly, or I saw it with the son of my best friend. He's highly sensitive, but that means that he takes over the energy of the other children in the class, and when there's unrest, he feels it.
Mhm.
And then he got punished for acting out and being like the funny joker in class. But he
Mhm.
was just expressing all the unrest of everybody else that's there. But he got punished for it. So then he feels like, I cannot be myself.
Yeah. Well, first, I appreciate you sharing that part of your story, and I'm sorry that you endured those things. And it speaks even more highly of who you've become, that
Yeah.
you've come so far on your journey from that point. So again, I appreciate you being willing to be vulnerable with that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, our home environments play such a huge role. But even if those are safe, which for many of us they're not, or not entirely, then we do, when we get into that peer group and you have those children who are experiencing their own traumatic environments at home, they bring that with them. And you're right. One of the other interesting things that happens is that because we're highly sensitive and we're empathic, we do have that gift of learning what other people expect from us. And so we can pick up on spoken and unspoken rules that are being applied to us, that by our peer group, and we can become chameleons of sorts and learn to just blend in because it's safer. And so you're right. There is that sense of turning down the dial on our own personality, especially in the area of self-expression, so that we become either somebody who can avoid getting bullied by being invisible, or somebody who stands doesn't stand out to the extent that we could in a positive way, because we're worried about the attention that that brings, and it's easier to just kind of be a gray version of ourselves. The term I often use is living a half life.
Yes.
So rather than being fully ourselves and self-expressive and having a healthy self-image, it's like, no, that's not safe. So let me just turn that down. Let me be who I need to be to survive in this environment. And it can take years, and some people never actually recover from that. And so I think that's part of why I love this model, and part of why I love coaching people in the area of self-worth specifically, because I think that for many of us, we've settled for low self-worth for years, and we've just adjusted to, this is how my life is, this is how it's going to be. And it doesn't have to be. So many of those things, all that innate worth has not gone anywhere. And I think that's the beauty that we'll explore in this conversation, is that your sense of self-worth can be damaged. Your actual worth can never be damaged or taken away or diminished by anything you experience, by anything that is said to you, by any situations that you go through in life. That value is there, and it's innate. And so, three phrases that I often use that I'll share with the audience here with my coaching clients are just three truths that have become a core part of who I am and what I believe. The first is that whoever you are, wherever you've been, whatever you've done, the truth about you is beautiful. The second is, you are worthy and deserving of every good thing you desire in life. And the third is that absolutely anyone can lead a life of intentional influence and impact. And so hopefully, if your viewers get nothing else, they'll take those truths and really weigh them out for themselves. But for me, those are three things that have been a core part of that recovery of my sense of self-worth.
Mhm.
That now if I believe them for you, I've got to believe them for myself. And I
Yeah.
share those with everyone. I try to share them as often as possible, because if we can live in light of those truths, and we can remember back to when we felt like the truth about us was beautiful, and remember now that it's still true, we can start down this road of recovery, self-recovery, this road of refilling, learning how to refill our self-worth accounts, and really stepping into the dynamic person that we were created to be, the force of nature that we were created to be. And when people do that, whether it's in coaching or in life in general, it's so beautiful to see that
Mm.
youthful innocence, that joy, and everything that comes out of that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And thank you so much for sharing these truths because they're absolutely true. And a lot of people, a couple of things came to mind when you were talking. One is sort of remembering who you always were. That's
Yes.
a phrase that I love to use.
Mhm.
But also, it's like your real self is dormant. It's like a bear
Mhm.
doing its winter sleep, only the winter lasts for years and years and years and
Yes.
years, but it can wake up again. So you can rekindle your inner fire and you can reconnect with who you really are and discover all the ins and outs that make you you, so that you open yourself up to seeing how beautiful you are. And that
Yes.
opens you up to starting to love yourself for who you really are. And that
Mhm.
then opens you up to being proud of yourself and thinking, you know what? I am an awesome human being, right?
Yes, absolutely. Um, I I love everything you've just said and just the energy behind it as well. I can feel it even from here. And you're absolutely right. And so if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and list the pillars and we can kind of talk about those and explore those. So
Yes.
the five pillars of healthy self-worth as I see them are beauty, courage, wisdom, or you could even call it curiosity, joy, and love. And so those are the things that I feel like when we experience the criticism, cruelty, mockery, trauma, or abuse, those are the things that come under attack. And you can almost see them in children if you watch from the sidelines, see them being shut down one at a time.
Mhm.
Their sense of self-worth is just slowly chipped away at. And so with when beauty goes, we lose that desire to express ourselves. When courage goes, we start to become less self confident. When wisdom goes, we're less perceptive of the environment around us. We lose our sense of self awareness to a certain extent, and that sense of identity. When joy goes, it's just like the light goes out of people. They have lower self esteem. They're not as willing to share themselves. They're not as enthusiastic. And then when love goes, especially if it's self love, when that's damaged, you have this sense, like you were talking about earlier, of going into hibernation, of our hearts closing off to the world to protect themselves.
Mhm.
And that's where I believe so many people find themselves today. And especially after the season we went through with COVID and the constant negative news that was coming towards us. And then for many of us, the loss of friends or relatives, or their severe illness during that time, which was frightening. Many of us, I believe, in that season, many people went into that kind of hibernation, even if they had come out of it. And many people who were there have gone even deeper. And so that's why I think conversations like this are so important,
Mhm.
because it's the goal of these conversations is to wake people back up and help them realize, like, okay, if your self-worth sense of self-worth has been damaged, let's see if we can reignite that. Let's see if we can touch each of these areas of beauty, courage, wisdom, joy, and love, and work on those together and get you back to the point where you're ready and you feel able to express yourself and live your best life.
Mhm.
Because I think the difference is going from that half life we were talking about to the vibrant and fulfilling lives that we desire. And the only way to do that is to work on those areas and bring them back around and get them healthy again and refill that self worth account.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I was bullied a lot in school, I already shared, and what they mostly called me was fat and
Mm.
ugly. So then I lost my sense of beauty, and that was further fueled by my dad saying that the only future he saw for me was going to the red light district in
Oh,
Amsterdam. And
wow.
for people who do not know what that means becoming a hooker. So then you lose indeed your sense of beauty, and then when you are very pure, which most highly sensitive people are, but definitely each child is very pure. And if
Mhm.
from your purity and your, what is the word I'm looking for? Your innocence as a child, you share what you see. And in
Mhm.
this case, it was my gift. And that was then also mocked or denied. So you lose your courage. You lose your courage for speaking up. And I remember that in the end, I it's not that I wanted to commit suicide, but I also didn't want to live. There was a
Wow.
moment in my life where I was riding my bike, which is a very normal thing in the Netherlands. We are a biking country. And
Mhm.
I just went to an intersection and I didn't even look left or right anymore. I just drove over it. And I thought if I'm being hit by a car, then that will be perfect as well. And
Mm.
it's the fatalistic feeling that you're getting because I felt unloved, unwanted, and just very, very alone. And you sink deeper and deeper into your pit, into your loneliness as time goes on, especially when nobody is there to reach out a hand, when nobody is there to encourage you, to tell you you are worthwhile, that you are beautiful. And
Mhm.
even sometimes my mother did tell me, you're beautiful or you're smart, but there were so many other sounds that said the
Yeah.
opposite, that it was like, yeah, whatever. And you didn't say yeah, whatever, but it didn't
Mhm.
penetrate anymore, because to protect yourself you start building walls, and within those walls you sort of wither away to the point of, well, dying almost.
Yeah. You're right, and it is absolutely heartbreaking, and I think for all of us, there are at least chapters, if not extremely poignant memories that come to mind and probably are coming to mind in your listeners right now. Because yeah, we go through sometimes accidental, but often deliberate assaults on our hearts, on our sense of self-worth. And so I'm happy to hear that your mom was kind of a lifeline for you in that season, and she was trying to make these positive um, you know, deposits into your self-worth account. And it sounds like that might have been the lifeline you needed because so many other people were making withdrawals so consistently, even your father, like you said. And so I think that that's something that personally I'm committed to is what Wallace Wattles in the science of being rich called the impression of increase. And
Mhm.
that's a principle that I love. And it's that idea of leaving everyone you encounter feeling better
Right.
than they did before you encountered them, giving them that impression of increase, helping them walk away feeling better about themselves and better about the world, and just making that positive impact. And I think
Mhm.
that that's the exact opposite of what you're talking about. We have so many people in the world who, for one reason or another, make withdrawals out of everyone they encounter. They're angry, they're bitter, they've given
Frustrated.
into that negativity. And so the benefit for us, and I'm sure many of your listeners will resonate with this, is that we can be that light in the world and that person who's committed to making those deposits into everyone we encounter and building up their sense of self-worth. And the
Mhm.
beautiful thing about that is that it's reciprocal. When I say something positive to you, when I encourage you, it puts a deposit into my account as well. And so one of the best ways to start recovering our sense of self-worth is to be positive to other people, to build up other people, to encourage others. And as
Mhm.
we do that, it's medicinal for our hearts and for theirs, and we can reawaken that sense of self-worth in the people that we encounter. And it's amazing to watch the positive ripple effect that happens, because
Mhm.
if I can make a deposit in your account and then you go and you share that with somebody else, whoever you have your next meeting with in the day or whatever, then it just spreads and it becomes a positive ripple effect as opposed to the negative ripple effects that so often happen because of what we talked about earlier, the media or social media, where everything is negative and doom and gloom. And so we can be those lights who spread positivity and positive energy and give those little bursts of self-worth. And coming back to the beginning of that, the whole idea there is that you or I might be that lifeline that somebody needs today, that person who reminds them that they're not alone, that they are loved, that the truth about them is beautiful. And if that doesn't get you excited, I'm not sure what will. It's got me fired up.
No, definitely. And I completely agree with you 100%. But I also know that for someone, especially like what I shared about myself, how I was feeling, but also what I
Mhm.
see with a lot of my clients is that they are beyond the point where they feel that they can even smile at
Mhm.
whatever. And my mother used to tell me, if only you would smile more. And I never smiled. And I think the most shocking was when I was confronted with a picture of myself that was taken when I thought nobody was watching. washing when nobody was there.
Mhm.
And everybody kept asking Mama, why are you always so angry? And I was never angry. So I never really understood it. And then I saw that picture and I thought, oh my God, when I'm very, very sad and depressed and lonely and miserable,
Mhm.
apparently I look angry. That was
Wow.
really shocking. And when you were talking, one of my clients came to mind. I remember the first time we met each other. She was at the end of her rope. She said, "You are my last hope. And if this doesn't succeed, then I'm seriously considering killing myself.
Wow.
Because, I don't know what to do anymore. The only thing positive in my life is my partner, but the rest, it sucks. My job, my friendships, everything, it sucks. And
Mhm.
no matter what I try, I just cannot seem to free myself off of these things." And she was very depressed, very sad, very negative, really, really at the end of her rope. And she took a chance on me and we started
Yeah.
working together. And I vividly remember the second session even that we had. And she came up to me and she was like this, right? This energy. And she was like, "Oh, I'm so happy that we are having this session here today." She was really like this, bubbling
Yeah.
of energy. So because I did such amazing things, and you are the only one I can share this with, because you are the only one that will understand. And I've been so
Mhm.
much looking forward to our session. And can I please share with you what I did? And of course,
Wow.
that light me up. And I
Mhm.
was like, yes, yes, go for it. Tell me, what did you do? And you have to remember, before that, she was like this,
Mhm.
and no energy at all. And she
Yeah.
said, the first thing I did as I wore two different socks to work, one with Popeye and one with Tweety. And I thought,
Yeah.
look at me being a badass rebel. And I had so much fun during the entire day, just remembering my socks. And I thought, oh, that is awesome, right? So different from a couple of weeks ago when we first met. And so now I'm dying to find out the other thing that you did. Yes, that's even better. She said, we went into the woods, it was fall. And you know what I did? I said, no, but you're going to tell me. Yes, she said, I'm going to tell you. She said, I kicked every leaf I could find, and it is full, so there were a lot. And I felt like a child, right? Just letting loose and playing in the leaves and kicking all the leaves and throwing them in the air and just dancing
Mhm.
around. And yeah, you can already tell that lights me up as well. It's
Yeah.
so rewarding to see someone go from very down and depressed and talking about suicide. It's not like you want to die, but you don't want to
Mhm.
continue living anymore. As
Yeah.
that's the distinction to going to ooh, ooh, ooh.
Yeah. That's amazing. And the term I often use that I like to use is the idea of rewriting our self-worth story.
Mhm.
And so if the story we've been told by other people is that we're worthless, that we have no value, then oftentimes that leads us to feel like, okay, well, if that's true, if I believe them, then you're right. The obvious question at that point is, then why is what life worth living? If every day I'm going to feel this miserable, if every day feels so empty, and if I'm worthless, what does the world lose if I step away? And that's, to me, the danger of low self-worth, is that eventually we can get to the point where we feel like we don't matter to anyone, we're not important to anyone,
Yes.
and that ultimately the world won't miss us. And to anyone who has that thought, I can tell them and I can assure them that is not true ever. You're never going to be without worth. There's never going to be someone who doesn't love you and doesn't find value in you, who doesn't need you in their lives, and who would say, yeah, just end it. No, I mean, there, all of us have this incredible worth built into us. And if we're struggling with that, my encouragement would be, if you have children, or if you're around a child, look at their innocence, look at their beauty, look at the joy that they have, and realize that that is still in you. that is still locked inside of you, and it may be very buried very deeply. Like you said, we can form these defensive walls around our heart, and we can hide that so that even eventually we don't see it ourselves. But ultimately, if you wouldn't tell that child that you walked by you're worthless, you're empty, you're shameful, then don't tell yourself that, because your inner child is just as pure and beautiful and innocent as that child that you see in front of you. And so
Hmm.
if we can remind ourselves of that, if we can see in them something that we can begin to see in ourselves, it helps to open our hearts back up, and it helps us to start rebuilding that sense of self-worth.
Hmm.
And then, like you're saying, there are things we can do to strengthen each of the 5 areas. So in terms of beauty, we can express ourselves, we can find something unique or bold about ourselves that we love, and a safe place to express that. Or even just to ourselves, even just singing out loud in the shower. I think it's funny because, as odd as that may seem, that triggers that sense of self-expression, that sense of beauty.
Yes.
In terms of courage, we can find a moment to speak up or speak out about something, even in the smallest ways, defending somebody, speaking up for or being a support to somebody and encouraging them, and that builds courage. In terms of wisdom, we can take, the other day, you and I talked about human design and gene keys. There's the highly sensitive person test, the Myers-Briggs test. All of those are ways to build up our wisdom because we can grow in self-awareness. And then in terms of joy, kicking in the leaves, flying a kite, these little things that we forget that we used to love, taking time to color or draw,
Sitting
watching
on the
one of our
swing.
favorite funny movies. All of those things are things that build up joy within us. And then with love, it's that sense of, it can be internal or external. We can do something to show love and self-care to ourselves. We can also show compassion to another person or encourage another person. And it's that simple to start rebuilding our sense of self-worth by doing what I call making deposits into our self-worth account. And to me, that's the road that leads us back to that healthy sense of self-worth that enables us to go out and live fully as ourselves.
You're absolutely right. And what I say to clients that come to me that have children is your inner child is more like your second or third or fourth, depending on how many children they have,
Mhm.
your second child or your third child. And the way you would talk to your own child, the way you would validate their worth, the way you would handle it when they have a boo-boo or
Mhm.
when they feel insecure about things, that is also how you can talk to your inner child. I
Yes.
often recommend buying a stuffed animal that represents your inner child or your third child,
Mhm.
and then, treating it the way you would treat your own children and saying it the things that you would have wanted people to say to you when you were growing up. And just
Yes.
having conversations with and saying, how are you feeling today? And what is it that you need? Oh, you need a hug? Oh, come here, I'll hug you. Or you need to tell me, or you need to hear that you're loved. I love you.
Mhm.
These are things that we can do with our inner child. And to further strengthen our bond with our inner child, we can do things that bring out the joy of a child, right? Like
Mhm.
kicking the leaves, or one of my favorites was always going to the playground and then just swinging on a swing. I
Mhm.
love the sense of freedom that comes from swinging and then going as high as possible, and then maybe on the up, jumping off and then not falling on your face, things like that. And those
Mhm.
are ways of connecting with the childlike energy in
Mhm.
yourself. And we have a tremendous power to heal ourselves when we just sort of talk to that part in ourselves that is hurt, because everything that part has been missing in life, the
Mhm.
adult version of us can give to that child part of ourselves. And in that way we can heal ourselves, and then we start to feel more courageous and we start to feel more loving. And by listening to ourselves, talking to ourselves, giving ourselves what we need, we practice that love for ourselves, which further fuels our healing process. And like I said, it's something that you can already do by yourself, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's, well, I'm struggling with better or easier, but those are not really the right words, but to do it with someone, because we have blind spots, especially when it comes to ourselves. And of course, you can do everything yourself, but sometimes it's nice to have a coach or a
Mhm.
cheerleader or someone that encourages you or that can ask the difficult questions that lead you to a certain insight, or
Yeah.
that can reach out to you and give you certain exercises in order to
Mhm.
talk with your child or to heal other parts, and maybe even fortify it with coaching sessions or energy work or whatever it is that the person that you put your trust in is versed at. And it's like going to the gym. You can go to the gym and you can want to be buff or lean depending on if you're a man or a woman, I think. And you can do it yourself. You can use the machines and you will get a result. But being buff or being slim enough for you to fulfill your goals might take a while when you're
Mhm.
doing it with yourself. But if you hire a personal trainer, which then would be you or me, for instance, or people
Mhm.
like us, the results come faster. And you
Yeah.
have someone to spar with, to talk with, to bounce ideas off of. And that can help you adjust the things that you're doing to have the maximum result in the shortest amount of time possible. And when you start loving yourself, trusting yourself, being proud of yourself, I promise you, life becomes so much more fun.
Yes. Absolutely. I love where you took that, and you're absolutely right. There is so much that we can do to begin healing our hearts, to begin reaching back and loving our inner child, and that part of us that's been hidden or has felt neglected or left behind. So often, what can happen is that there's a part of us that the people around us don't like, even just, as highly sensitive people. Even our sensitivity, even our empathy can come under attack of you're too soft, you're too, emotional, you're too sensitive. And so we learn to hide that, and it's almost like that piece of our heart gets left behind in the dark. And so,
Mhm,
yeah, part of that inner child work is that we can go back and we can recognize, no, there are gifts there that I was given at birth to love people deeply and compassionately and unconditionally, and to see the best in everyone around me and to believe in everyone around me. And that gift of encouragement is locked up in there until we begin to share that. And I love, one of the things you talked about especially was the idea of finding people who can give us exercises and guidance, because I think that's so important in terms of recovering our sense of self-worth. Is not just how do we actively build that, but how do we learn to protect our hearts.
mhm,
Earlier I referred to an exercise that I like to give to my clients, and it's a almost an analogy of sorts, because when you think about, as highly sensitive people, we're born with our hearts wide open.
mhm,
And so that means that everything that people say comes straight in, and that can be really good if we're surrounded by healthy, positive, encouraging people. But when we start to be around those negative people, they shoot those poison arrows right in. And
mhm,
something I teach my clients and encourage them is that no matter how close you are or whether it's a complete stranger, you always have the ability to hold the words out in front of you that they speak to you first before you take anything in. Even
yes,
somebody that you love, even somebody that you trust, even your partner, your children, your parents, no matter who the person is, you can learn to hold those words out and look at them and see if there is truth there. And see also, is there an agenda there? Is this a lie? Is
yes,
this them trying to attack me because there's something in them that wants to attack, but it actually has nothing to do with me?
mhm,
And so we can learn to filter the words that are said to us or spoken to us through that process, and realize, wait, no, this person that I thought was a friend is actually constantly throwing criticism and poison arrows in my direction. So I'm going to distance myself a little bit from that person because they're no longer safe. And instead, I'm going to be very careful about what words they say to me I allow in. And yet, you may have this person over here who everything they say, because they're genuine and compassionate and they truly do see the best in you, they have all sorts of positive things that they can pour into your lives. And I think that's where, going back to what you were saying in terms of a coach or a trainer, the benefit is, if you think about how our sense of self-worth or even our subconscious mind is formed, it's a series of votes. It's the external influences and the internal influences, our self-talk. And so really it's this idea of right now, if we're in a dark, unhealthy place, it's because more votes have been cast for that in our lives by ourselves and by others than positive votes. So when we start to work on ourselves and we start to heal and we start to do positive things for ourselves, all of those things are casting these positive votes for our sense of self-worth. And so
Yes.
they're rebuilding that because it's one after another of these positive experiences, positive words, positive exercises that we're doing. And it starts to rebuild and build that momentum back up. And then if we surround ourselves with positive people, we're saying positive things to them, we're building them up, which again helps fill up our account as well. But then also we're receiving from them all this positive energy and positive momentum. And so it's the easiest way to rebuild our sense of self-worth is by finding these positive people to be around and being a positive person ourselves. And for people who are struggling and they just can't find their way to take that first step or to figure out how do I look at the relationships around me and set appropriate boundaries and you know, create some distance with those people who are very negative, a coach can guide you and help you and like you said, ask those tough questions of, is this person really, do they have your best interest in mind, or could this person be a narcissist or an energy vampire who, as much as you are trying to refill your sense of self-worth, they're pulling away and making withdrawals consistently. And so those are questions that I've needed a coach to help me with, and I'm sure you have as well, but that's the benefit. But either way, starting that work as soon as possible is so imperative and so important.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is like a muscle that can be trained.
Yes.
And there are various techniques that I can teach you, that other people can teach you, to keep it more outside of yourself, to protect
Mhm.
you, to sort of surround yourself with a sort of energy field, for
Yes.
instance, that doesn't allow it to come near. But at any given moment, you have a choice of thinking, am I allowing this inside? When somebody fires an arrow towards you with hurt or resentment or anger or bullying or whatever it is,
Mhm.
you can decide, stop here. I'm deflecting.
Mhm.
I don't, I'm not accepting this. You
Yeah.
might want to fire it at me, sure, go ahead, but I'm not receiving it. And for those of you who listen to this and think, that sounds awesome, but how the peep do I do this? uh, that those are some of the things that it might be awesome for, to talk to someone who knows how they can teach you to do this. And
Mhm.
it's something that you need to train. And I love also, in the beginning of what you said, you sort of connected with another pitfall, I call it, of the highly sensitive people, and that is, we care too much about what other people think and say,
Mhm.
especially when it's about us. So we need to, or at least and I think in general, we need to learn to not care so much.
Yeah.
And that's why one of my favorite books is, um, I just had the title. It's from Mark Manson. Oh, The Science of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
That was it. And it's not that you don't care, but you need to be selective with what you care about. And I
Mhm.
also often give an exercise to my clients where I draw a heart and then I draw circles around it. And what happens when we are a highly sensitive person is when the person behind the cash register at the supermarket has a bad day and is being
Mhm.
rude and obnoxious to you, it hits us right in the heart. And
Yeah.
when our partner is having an obnoxious day, or maybe a bad day, or it's that
Mhm.
time of the month if you're a guy, and acts out, then it also hits us in the heart. So we, in
Mhm.
general, don't make a distinction between someone who's close to us and someone who should be a lot further away. Because in
Yeah.
the end, what do you care what someone who works behind the cash register says or does to you, when it affects your day and your mood in such a negative way
Mhm.
that it's bothering you for the rest of the day, and maybe even your sleep? And then you wake up tired, and you're already a couple of steps behind when the day is just starting.
Yeah.
So everything is about managing your thoughts, because in the end it is your thoughts that trigger emotions, that trigger actions, that then trigger certain results. And
Absolutely.
we live on autopilot programs, right? And that is a very useful thing, because if we constantly needed to think, oh yeah, breathing in, holding it a little bit, breathing out, holding it a little, or lifting leg, putting it forward, putting it down, okay, lifting other leg, shifting weight, when we try to walk, then that would
Mhm.
be disastrous. So it's
Absolutely.
beneficial that we have a lot of these autopilot programs, but especially when we have a traumatic youth or things have happened, we create autopilot programs that saved us at that
Yeah.
moment, but that hinder us or even stop us at a later age. And then we need to unlearn these patterns. And
Mhm.
that is something that usually works better with some help.
Yes,
Yes.
I agree. And that's, as you were talking, a couple of thoughts that came up. One is a phrase that someone said to me, and as a highly sensitive person, it caught me off guard and it took me a while to process and decide whether or not I agreed. And he told me, you can care about people and not care what people say.
Yes.
And you can care about a person and not care what that person says. And I thought, I don't know that I'd ever actually made that distinction. And that was just a couple of years ago. But the way he said it and the way it hit me, I realized that so often because of my sense of low self-worth that I had, almost had this sense that other people know me better than I know myself, and other people see me more clearly than I see myself. And I would allow their words to go straight to my heart because I felt like I don't have worth unless other people approve of me. But in that desperate need for approval from others, I also opened myself and made myself vulnerable to people who should not have been speaking into my life and who were not safe to be speaking into my life. And
Yeah.
that led to burnout and all sorts of things. And that's, again, why this process is so important, because if we have healthy self worth, especially in terms of burnout, we're not going to allow ourselves to be abused in a workplace or, you know, worn out from a workplace or taken advantage of by the people around us, because we think, no, you can't speak to me that way. You can't treat me that way. I'm not your doormat. I have worth. I have value. And that was something I wish I'd heard a conversation like this sooner, because there was a very dark season there for me of
Mm.
burnout and depression. And I think the biggest thing that came out of that was the work that I do today, which is this sense of seeing value in everybody, but also now seeing value in myself again, and wanting so desperately to impress upon everyone I encounter that, again, the truth about them is beautiful, that they do have so much value and worth, that it's innate, that it hasn't gone anywhere, and to reactivate that. Because, like you said, when we do that, when we can help someone in that way, you see them light back up, like your client you described. It's like we literally, my coaching program, part of it is called the way of the phoenix, because I feel like it's that extreme of that old self who is either, living a half life or is almost just completely dormant, can be reawakened. And when that happens, that the energy those people bring back to life, to their relationships, to their work, is just absolutely incredible to see that transformation. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. And so,
Mhm.
that's why I love digging into this topic. And that's why I love helping people with the exercises and tools and resources that helped me, because I want to see everybody come back to life and live in alignment with their authentic selves and be the force of nature they were created to be.
Yeah.
And nothing makes me happier to see that than to see that personal evolution take place in the people I'm around.
I love that, Josh, and I love everything that you're sharing. And we have very similar mission and thought patterns. So it's been an amazing talk. We've hit amazing points. I think this is going to be really valuable to people. And if you're one of those people who found it really valuable, it would be amazing if you would subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any new videos. But also if you could leave a comment. And what is your key takeaway out of today's topic? What's the thing that resonated the most? I would love it if you could put that in the comments underneath this video. And if you felt that this conversation was really valuable, I would love it even more if you would share it with your network. Share it on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you're encountering this talk, because chances are very high that you have people in your environment, in your friend group, in your network that need to hear this talk, that may be struggling, because we are also very good at hiding everything
Mhm.
and not showing it to the outside world, to keeping up appearances for as long as that's possible. So you would be doing them a great service by sharing this talk so that they can benefit from it as well. I can also imagine that after listening to us, you would want to know, where can you find Josh? How can you reach Josh? What? So Josh, where can people find you?
So the best place, social media wise, is always on LinkedIn. And so if you look up Josh Speraneo, or if you can't remember that, just think the success cycle. And that'll get you to me, to my profile. And I'd love to connect with you on there and continue the conversation for sure. And you can also go to my website, which is just successcycle.com. And that, if you go to the coaching page, especially, there are all sorts of resources on there. One of them I'd recommend after this conversation is a short ebook I wrote called How to Rewrite Your Self-Worth Story. And there are some exercises and worksheets in that I think will piggyback off of our conversation. But anyway, so just I want to thank you for having me on, and thank your audience for spending this time with us. I've loved this conversation so much. I'm already jazzed up and excited for the day. And so thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much also for being here, Josh, and for sharing everything that you shared. If you thought, oh, this went too fast, I missed the links, don't worry. I've put all of them in the show notes of this episode. So either go down or to the left or up. I never really know where they end up, but
They're
somewhere
everywhere.
around this video will be show notes, and there you will find the links. So take Josh up on his offer, go and download that book and start working on yourself. And if you want to continue the conversation, either with Josh or with me, then reach out. I offer a free coffee chat where we can just talk, and you can find me on all social media. The links will also be below this video. So I want to thank you, Josh, for being here, for sharing your wisdom and your passion and, your awesome personality. And you, viewer, listener, I want to thank you for being here, for donating your time, for listening to us, for finishing with us to the end of this conversation. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And I look forward to inspiring you more next week with next week's video. For now, I wish you an amazing rest of your day, and I hope to see you again next week.